It's finally time to talk about Elden Ring. Now that the DLC is out, I think it's a good time to kind of explore whether or not this is a good game for someone just starting their Souls journey. To give you guys a little background, I've been playing Souls and Souls-like games since 2016. They're honestly some of my favorite games I've ever played, period. The challenges of overcoming seemingly impossible obstacles is one of the most satisfying feelings I've ever felt in gaming. Like many others, I was incredibly excited about experiencing those highs with Elden Ring. For me, Elden Ring was satisfying, yet left a lot to be desired. The exploration and journey are arguably the best parts of the game, but there are some aspects of it that do fall short. But the question that we want to answer today is Elden Ring a good entry point for someone who's never experienced FromSoft's library before? The answer is maybe. Despite its challenges, Elden Ring is, in my opinion, the easiest Souls games that they've ever made. Sounds a bit surprising, right? Well, here, let me explain. Elden Ring's greatest strength, its fast open world, might also be its biggest weakness for first-time Souls players. The lands between allow you to go anywhere and do anything, and while this freedom is fantastic for exploration, it can kind of change how the difficulty spikes are perceived. Take Margit, for example, the game's first real boss. On my first playthrough, I faced him early on with minimal leveling, and I did struggle immensely. But with my previous Souls experience, I persisted and eventually triumphed. In Elden Ring, I could have explored more, leveled up, found better gear, and returned to beat Margit more easily. The game encourages this approach. Can't beat this boss, explore, and come back stronger. This is the greatest strength of the game, and I appreciate the game subtly encouraging you to kind of go out and explore and come back when you're ready. Now, contrast this with other Souls games like Dark Souls 3. When you face a boss there, you usually don't have many other options but to get good at the fight. The game's linear design means you've likely explored most of the area by the time you reach the boss. And in Bloodborne, if you can't beat Father Gascoigne, the first boss of that game, your only real option is to just get better at the fight. There's no extensive world to explore for better gear or more levels, and this fundamental difference means that if Elden Ring is your first Souls game, you might be in shock when transitioning to the others. Now, I do want to talk about what left me wanting more in Elden Ring: the bosses. While I appreciate the insane difficulty, many of the endgame bosses honestly feel kinda unfair. The Elden Beast is one of the worst bosses I've ever faced in a video game, and Malekith the Black Blade feels like a cat on a caffeine high. And reusing overworld bosses comes off as a little bit of laziness. So yeah, there are some frustrating bosses, but what's the big deal? The issue is that depending on what type of build you have, these bosses and the game in general can feel completely different. I myself have always been a fan of strength and dexterity builds with little to no blocking and mostly dodging. In fact, this is how most of the get good players that you've seen around come to play these games. And in my opinion, these are the most fun way to play the games. However, as you've probably noticed from watching the gameplay in the background, I am using a magic build and summons for the most part, because after multiple playthroughs with a lot of different builds, I can confidently say that traversing the world and facing these bosses with magic is like night and day compared to a melee build. Now, to be clear, I'm not shitting on people who enjoy magic. Magic hasn't really worked that well in other Souls games, so to have a system that is not only viable but also fun to play is exciting for people who do want to use that magic. But the issue is that with magic, and especially summons, you can very easily just ignore the boss, or at the very least, keep your distance. You can't do that with a melee build, and you most certainly cannot do this in other Souls games. Bosses will often completely ignore you once they get a lock-in on your summon, and this makes a lot of the endgame bosses more bearable. Try going into one of these fights with a melee build, and you'll be shocked at the difference in difficulty. This is how one would normally go into a fight in other Souls games. And people always are asking From Software for an easy mode. And in some ways, they've complied with the introduction of useful magic into Elden Ring. Now yes, you still have to maintain your distance, and you do have to occasionally dodge, and there is the challenge of having to split your flask into FP and health instead of allocating to just HP. But it's a far cry from having to get in there and learn to dodge. And this really isn't helped by some of the wonky hitboxes that some of the endgame bosses have. Now in other games like Sekiro, it's literally just you and your blade. And even in a lot of other Souls-like games such as Nioh, which is not developed by From Software but has a lot of the same elements as Sekiro, give you a lot fewer options than Elden Ring when it comes to overcoming these bosses. At this point, I do really want to stress that I don't think transitioning from Elden Ring to other Souls games is impossible for newer players, but you can't deny that they'll be in for quite a shock when it comes to those difficulty spikes. So while Elden Ring offers an incredible open world experience, it might not be the best starting point for new Souls players due to its unique approach to difficulty and progression. The bottom line is, if you're new to these series, be prepared for different challenges when you move on to the Souls games. You will not be able to go and explore and come back and level up. Now, yes, you can go out, you can farm souls, so if you can farm blood vials and Bloodborne, and you can come back and have a little bit of an edge on the boss, but really when it comes down to it, is you just need to go in there and you need to learn to dodge, you need to learn the boss's moveset, and you need to get good. And for someone experiencing the Souls series just for the first time with Elden Ring, I think it'll be a much more difficult transition than if you were to start with, say, Dark Souls 3. But anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Have you found Elden Ring easier or harder compared to other Souls games? Drop a comment below, and if you did enjoy this little tiny analysis, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more gaming insights. I'd love to continue to make these videos, and I've been wanting to make this video for a little while here, and I do want to look forward to kind of making more long form content, kind of like video essays in the future. So if that's something you guys like, or you want to hear me talk more about Elden Ring, just let me know. Anyways, y'all have a good rest of your day.